An 11-year-old girl, a walk home from summer school, a turquoise van parked at the side of the road. One witness saw her standing next to it, talking to the driver. Nobody saw what happened next. Her body was found the following morning, less than 24 hours after she left school, in a ditch near a nature trail on the edge of Newport Beach. For 46 years, her photo hung on the wall of the Newport Beach Police Department. Not because there was a regulation requiring it, not because anyone ordered it, because the officers who worked there, generation after generation, refused to let the question die with the file. Then, on the exact 45th anniversary of the day her body was found, a police department did something no law enforcement agency in America had ever done, and it changed everything. This is the story of Linda Ann O'Keefe. Summer 1973. America was exhaling after years of the Vietnam War. Soldiers were coming home. Beaches were crowded for the first full summer since the withdrawal. The country felt like it was trying to remember what normal was supposed to feel like. Newport Beach was exactly the kind of place where normal felt guaranteed. An affluent coastal community where people bought homes overlooking the Pacific and sent their children to summer school without a second thought about what the walk home might hold. Linda Ann O'Keefe was 11 years old. She was attending summer school at Lincoln Intermediate School in Corona del Mar, a familiar school with familiar hallways and friends she already knew. The walk home was a route she had taken before, a route that had never given anyone any reason to take twice about it. On the afternoon of July 6, 1973, Linda left Lincoln Intermediate School and began walking home. No one knows exactly when she left. No one knows how far she had walked before it happened. A witness saw her, Linda Ann O'Keefe, standing beside a turquoise van on the side of the road, talking to the driver. A white man, approximately mid-20s to early 30s, sitting behind the wheel. The witness did not see Linda get into the van, did not see which direction it pulled away. No license plate, no name, no further description beyond his approximate age and the color of the vehicle. That was the last time Linda Ann O'Keefe was seen alive. Her family waited, then grew worried, then called the Newport Beach Police Department. Officers began searching for an 11-year-old girl who had disappeared somewhere between her school and her front door, in a neighborhood where violent crime was something that happened somewhere else. On the morning of July 7, 1973, less than 24 hours after Linda left school, her body was found in the Back Bay area, a wild natural region on the edge of Newport Beach, a ditch near a nature trail. The autopsy confirmed she had been abducted, assaulted, and strangled. Investigators kept two details out of the press for years, both to protect the integrity of the case. The first was that Linda had been sexually assaulted. The second was that the attacker had left biological evidence behind. Forensic scientist Jim White collected and preserved that evidence in 1973. In 1973, DNA technology in criminal investigations did not exist. There was no national database, no concept that biological material from a crime scene could one day generate a name. Jim White preserved the evidence anyway, because evidence must be kept. Because the day the science catches up to what you collected is the day the case breaks open. That instinct, made in 1973 without any knowledge of what would eventually be possible, became the single foundation on which this entire case would later be solved. Before we go further, if cold case evidence is new to you, this is exactly what we do here. Every week we cover cold cases like this one, the people who kept pushing, the breakthroughs that finally came, and the science that made it possible. Subscribe and hit the bell so you never miss the next case. Now back to Newport Beach and the investigation that followed. In the weeks and months after Linda's body was found, Newport Beach detectives pursued every available lead. They checked lists of men who might have been in the Corona del Mar area on the afternoon of July 6th. They questioned individuals matching the witness description. They searched California vehicle registrations for Turquoise vans.
Nothing led to a specific suspect strong enough to move the case forward. What investigators didn't know was that the man who had been behind that wheel had already left California. He had moved to Florida, putting enough geographic distance between himself and Newport Beach to ensure the investigation there would never reach him. And then he did something that made him even harder to find. He changed his name. The man Newport Beach detectives were looking for under the name James Layton had become James Neal. A calculated decision to completely sever the connection between who he had been in Orange County in 1973 and whoever he was becoming somewhere else. He eventually settled in Colorado. He built a quiet life. He grew old. And for more than 42 decades, while Linda's photo hung on the wall of the Newport Beach police station, James Allen Neal lived free. There was no regulation requiring the Newport Beach Police Department to keep Linda O'Keefe's photograph displayed for decades. No policy, no mandate from above. It was a choice, made and renewed by every generation of officers who came through those doors. A wordless institutional promise that the girl in the photo had not received justice, that the question from the afternoon of July 6, 1973 was still open, and that anyone who worked there had inherited the responsibility to keep looking. New officers who had never heard her name, retirees who had spent entire careers looking at that face without finding an answer. The photo outlasted them all. In the late 1990s, Newport Beach investigators sent the biological evidence Jim White had preserved since 1973 to the lab. Using technology that hadn't existed when the crime was committed, analysts built a suspect DNA profile from material that had been in storage for more than 2 decades. In 2001, that profile was uploaded to CODIS, the FBI's National Combined DNA Index System, the database that stores genetic profiles from individuals arrested for qualifying offenses across the country. No match came back. Linda's killer had never been arrested for a crime that required DNA collection. He wasn't in the system. The profile sat in CODIS with no name attached to it, accurate, complete, and waiting while James Neal lived quietly in Colorado. Between 1995 and 2004, while Linda's case remained unsolved and her photo still hung on the wall, Neal sexually assaulted 2 other young girls in Riverside County, California. The same man, 30 years later, 2 more children, while the system still hadn't found him. July 7, 2018, the exact 45th anniversary of the morning Linda's body was found. The Newport Beach Police Department paused all regular social media content and did something no law enforcement agency in America had ever done. They spent the entire day retelling Linda's case in her own voice, 1 tweet at a time, in chronological order, from the morning of July 6, 1973, when she went to summer school, to the following morning when she was found. Each tweet was Linda, speaking, Linda telling her own story 45 years after she was gone. Hi, I'm Linda, or Linda Ann O'Keefe if I'm in trouble with my mom. 45 years ago today, I disappeared from Newport Beach. I was murdered and my body was found in the Back Bay. And then the line that stopped people scrolling. But now, 45 years later, I have a voice again, and I have something important to say. There is a new lead in my case, a face that comes from DNA that the killer left behind. It's technology that didn't exist back in 1973, but it might change everything today. Department spokesperson Jennifer Manzella later explained the thinking behind the campaign.
They wanted people to have that experience, walking home from school with Linda, standing next to the turquoise van, and not making it home, so that they wouldn't just read about the case, but feel it in a way no press release could achieve. Those tweets spread far beyond Newport Beach. Millions of people encountered Linda O'Keefe's story for the first time. A 46-year-old cold case was suddenly everywhere. Alongside the Twitter campaign, Newport Beach released something that had never been possible in 1973. A suspect sketch, not built from the witness's memory of the man behind the wheel, but constructed entirely from the DNA Linda's killer had left on her body. Phenotype prediction technology had allowed analysts to reconstruct estimated physical features from genetic material, skin tone, eye color, facial bone structure, age progression. Jim White had collected that DNA in 1973 without knowing that 45 years later it would generate a face. The combination of the social media campaign and the DNA portrait placed Linda's case before a national audience and created the momentum that pushed the investigation to its next stage, one that nobody in 1973 could have imagined. In 2018, while the campaign was generating national attention, Newport Beach quietly partnered with Parabon Nanolabs, the private forensic DNA company whose genetic genealogy division was led by C.C. Moore, the same forensic genealogist who had worked on dozens of cold cases across the country. The suspect DNA, preserved since 1973, was uploaded to Family Tree DNA, a public genealogy database where millions of Americans voluntarily submit their genetic information to find ancestors and distant relatives. The database searched for partial matches, not a direct hit on the killer himself, but matches strong enough to indicate blood relatives. From those relatives, genealogists built family trees outward, generation by generation, narrowing by age, sex, and geography until the lines converged on a single individual. In January 2019, the family tree pointed to one name, James Allen Neal, 72 years old, living in Monument, Colorado. A man who had lived in Orange County, California in the early 1970s under the name James Layton and had been living under an assumed name ever since. Investigators did not approach Neal immediately. They placed him under surveillance and waited for an opportunity to collect a DNA sample he left behind in his normal daily routine. The sample was sent to the lab and compared against the biological evidence Jim White had preserved in 1973. Complete match. The man living quietly in Monument, Colorado, the man who had changed his name, crossed state lines, and built an entirely new identity, was the same person who had been behind the wheel of that turquoise van on the afternoon of July 6, 1973. 46 years, one preserved evidence sample, one genealogist, one family tree. In February 2019, James Allen Neal was arrested in Monument, Colorado, and extradited to California to face charges of murder with special circumstances, kidnapping, and committing a lewd act on a child under 14, along with charges related to the sexual assaults of two young girls in Riverside County between 1995 and 2004.
On February 20, 2019, Newport Beach Police Department and the Orange County District Attorney's Office held a joint press conference. The person standing at the podium was Orange County DA Todd Spitzer, who had been 12 years old in 1973 when Linda was killed, nearly the same age as Linda herself. He had grown up in Southern California, while her case was a story the community never fully put down. This significant arrest is a confirmation that we never give up on solving cold cases. The unity of the community, the cooperation of law enforcement, and the use of investigative tools like DNA are what helped find the answer for this family. Newport Beach Police Chief John Lewis looked into the cameras.
Linda never made it home that afternoon. For 45 years, generations of our investigators never gave up. We never forgot Linda. On May 25, 2020, James Allen Neal was taken to a hospital due to an undisclosed illness. 2 days later, on May 27, 2020, he died at the age of 73 while awaiting trial. The man who had sat behind the wheel of that turquoise van, who had changed his name and crossed state lines, who had built a quiet life in Colorado while Linda's photo hung on a wall in Newport Beach for nearly half a century. He died before the case went to trial, before a jury heard his name read aloud, before Linda's family could sit in a courtroom and hear the word guilty. There was no conviction, no sentence, no legal moment. DA Todd Spitzer said what the family couldn't. James Neal's death before he could be brought to trial robbed the O'Keefe family of the justice they deserved. Police Chief John Lewis said, "We intended to bring James Allen Neal to trial to answer for the murder of Linda Ann O'Keefe. Through the tireless efforts of generations of investigators, we hope to bring a measure of closure to Linda's family." This case leaves 3 things that deserve to be said clearly. The first is about Jim White's decision in 1973, a forensic scientist who had no concept of what DNA analysis in criminal investigations would one day become, who collected and preserved biological evidence purely out of professional instinct. That single decision, made 46 years before the case broke open, became the only foundation on which everything else was built. No Twitter campaign, no genetic genealogy, no arrest. Without Jim White keeping that evidence in 1973, none of it happens. If you have a loved one whose case is unsolved, ask the investigating agency directly, has the biological evidence been retested with modern DNA technology? That question could be the difference between a case staying cold and a killer being identified. The second is about the 2018 social media campaign. Newport Beach had no new leads when they launched it, only the determination to present an old question in a new way and reach a new audience. That campaign directly created the pressure that led to the genetic genealogy work and the result in January 2019. Sometimes the breakthrough doesn't come from new evidence. It comes from making sure the right people finally see the evidence that already exists. The third is the most painful. Between 1995 and 2004, while Linda's case was still open and her photo still hung on that wall, James Neal sexually assaulted 2 more young girls in Riverside County. 30 years after Linda, the same man, new victims. A cold case is not only delayed justice, it is an open window for the person responsible to keep causing harm while the system hasn't yet found him. An 11-year-old girl left summer school on a July afternoon in 1973 and never made it home. Her photo hung on the wall of a police station for 46 years, not because anyone required it, but because the officers who worked there refused to let her become just a file number on a shelf. A forensic scientist kept evidence nobody yet had the tools to read. A police department told her story in her own voice on the anniversary of her death. A genealogist built a family tree that reached a man living quietly under a different name in Colorado. And the man who took her from that sidewalk died in custody, identified, arrested, and waiting for a trial that never came. The question from July 6, 1973 finally had a name attached to it. The courtroom moment never arrived. Linda Ann O'Keefe, 11 years old, Newport Beach, California. She never made it home that afternoon. If cold case evidence brought this story to you, subscribe. New cases every week. Leave your thoughts in the comments. Which part of this case stayed with you?